about what are all these different colors? What is all this different time for? And then again, I look and anything that makes very interesting claims like that, and anything that just then ends with, well, it just, that's how it works.
Well, and again,
and then it's that much alcohol. I'm like I've never sprayed alcohol like that on my plants.
Like I say so many times to people, like, there's no industry in the world where there's such a highly uneducated group running the industry. And not for nothing, it's easy to come across and make claims when you're in markets where cannabinoids are so. Hey, welcome back to the Jug Dealers Podcast, all things cannabis and lifestyle related, brought to you by the good people at 5-8 Distribution. We're back in studio.
Back in the Jug Den.
We're here to answer some questions today, some viewer questions. They've been kind of stacking up. We don't want people to think that we're forgetting about you, so we wanted to just kind of do a listener question episode. We had a couple things we kind of wanted to discuss as well, just separately, just because it's 2024.
It is 2024.
Not only is it a new year, but it's an election year. So, you know, you got lots of potential changes going on. One of the things we wanted to bring up is it's 10 years of recreational legalization as of the beginning of what, you know, we're obviously, over a month in, but what was the beginning of this year was 10 years of legalization in Colorado, in which now it's ballooned to 24 states.
24 states.
In that 10 years.
And I believe it was even because it was 2012 that it actually was voted in, but it was the moratorium, getting it all going.
Yeah, getting it all going.
It was 20. It was 14 when you could actually walk into a store.
Yes. Yeah. And I remember, middle of 13, we had a big U-Haul that we actually transferred plants from one building to another. I mean,
the Immaculate Conception of these plants.
Yes. And we're driving around with a big rider truck with just, 500 plants in it. So it's interesting to see it now because, I've been involved in some of the markets in some of these states. I've seen it change throughout the years. And like we said, we're at 24 states now. Segueing past that, the feds just released, I think yesterday, a proposal to talk about going Schedule 3, which realistically, I don't know how you feel, but I have mixed emotions about it.
I have very mixed emotions about it. I mean, to me, and especially somebody like yourself and myself who have, been a big part of building this industry and making our livings out of this industry and making a living off this plant, it just makes you go, where do I end up in this?
Well, you know what I mean? And a lot of it, what people don't realize is like, it really pushes that medical way in which, I've said for years, having constructed a lot of these facilities, big ones too, we're talking, 75, 100, right, 200,000 square feet, and telling these people that like, hey, you're going to need to build this FDA spec because ultimately
eventually they're going to come around.
Eventually they're going to come in which I definitely see buildings that aren't FDA spec. And I think it's going to be, I think there's going to be when this happens and if it goes down, I've always said, I really thought it was going to be 2030 before we figured it out. But if they start trying to figure it out sooner, there's going to be a lot of attrition.
Well, there's we're already losing a lot of people out.
Yeah, there's already been a lot of attrition.
There's already, and it's again, I look at it and go, where do small independents like us, end up? Where do people that, have helped? Because, I mean, for the record, we've already seen this happen once in Colorado, right? Mm-hmm. All the people that came in and said, well, we don't know how to grow weed. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to take all these guys that have been doing a black market. We're going to drag them out of the shadows and put them into the light and then pretty much shit on them eventually and said, oh, yeah, thanks, but no thanks, bye-bye. You know what I mean? As far as ownership opportunities, equity opportunities, that possibility, the ability to continue to work in the market. Many of them had the rug pulled right out from under them, right?
And it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. I mean, it's, for those of us who've been at it a long time, you definitely see, especially towards election years, you definitely see the government start to posture to make moves, whether they actually make those moves. That's a lot of times it's a bipartisan thing because you'll see, someone, I always get someone who sends me an article and they go, oh, government's going for legalization. And you're like, and it's up for a vote in the House, or it's up for a vote in the Senate.
Sure.
And you're like, sending me that article doesn't mean a goddamn thing, because ultimately up for a vote usually means it's going to fail.
Right. A lot of things go up for a vote.
So it is one of those things where the change in scheduling is definitely a different language than what they've taken previous to this.
That is true. And that reality is, like, I've always been the type of person that I think that, that cannabis should be as prevalent as tomato plants, in the sense that, like, if you ever have, and what's interesting, if you go down the medical route, right, then it's like, well, they don't, okay, they don't allow us to grow poppy plants, and everybody realizes maybe they do, maybe they don't, but there are massive poppy fields out there that are government ran, pharmaceutically owned. In fact, the south of Spain is absolutely littered with them. Yeah. You have to have the source material, much like with concentrates and extracts. You have to have the source material.
Plant-based medicine.
You know what I mean? So I look at it and I was like, okay, there is certain things when you take that medical road that they're not, well, quite frankly, they're not willing to give up the profits on it. So, but I've always said from the beginning, any legalization laws that don't have a home growing component, because to me, it's not legal unless you can grow it yourself.
See, I've heard that it's going to be home grow, but it's going to be like 7 plants, and anything over 7 plants,
they will heavily crack down.
Is going to be a felony.
Right.
You're producing pharmaceuticals in your house.
But again, they cap how much beer you can brew in a year, things like that. This isn't unprecedented. They do. Yeah, you can only.
How much beer can you brew in a year?
It's like it is obscene amount, a couple hundred gallons or something like that. It's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, like,
I didn't realize there was a cap on that.
There is a cap on that. There is a cap on that, and things similar with distilling, things like that. Like, and especially doing it on any kind of, you can't sell it or anything like that. But even for personal production, there is an actual cap on it.
Interesting.
Look it up. So I look at it and go, okay. I mean, if you're looking at it as an intoxicant or whatever, I mean, I can see some validity in it and go, okay, you can't just have a whole backyard full of it. That could be, have some issues that come along with it, right? But my whole thing is, though, if it's legal, you should be able to grow it. So with any kind of legalization, whether it's federal or state, you got to be able to grow it personally, number one, and then number two, an ability for university research. And if there's no ability for university research, it's like, how are we even going to move this along? And then number three, some sort of hemp component. So those are the three things for me that I look for, in any kind of legalization law. And of course, beyond that, then I start looking at how many licenses are they giving out, things like that. So, like, to me, it's like, oh, is this a big boy?
Yeah, I mean, if it's going a pharmaceutical way, that's gonna,
well, it's going to go to that.
And like we always discuss, like, if your building isn't let's just say they let everybody play. Yeah. Let's just say that everybody becomes an independent supplier. If you're in, you're good to go. But you got to bring your building up to FDA spec.
You're losing
50% of the processor provider.
I'll be honest,
if not more.
I bet you're conservative on that.
Yeah, Because even when I was working at Grassroots, and I would recommend, in fact, I had a guy that I worked with, and he came through and audited the building just to upgrade it to FDA spec.
Sure, why not?
He actually worked in pharmaceutical, and they weren't having it. They weren't having it. Nope. They were like, what, $500,000 ticket to put air curtains in? And people don't realize, going back to the IPM episode, a lot of these things are floor mats when you walk in, hand sanitizers outside the rooms. Part of it too. All the air showers. And again, and it all adds up.
Why? To minimize chemical control, right?
Yeah. And like I said, at some point there's going to be something that slips through. You know what I mean? At some point, it's inevitable.
Absolutely. There's too many entry points.
Yeah, and it's not common in the industry, but one of the reasons we don't, people get so scared with the chiller systems, but one of the reasons people use chiller systems in labs is because there's none of that air duct movement. There's none of that. Right. You're not needing outside air for your building, in which when you use normal HVAC units,
it's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah, well, we actually used to put plates over our outdoor air intakes. So,
just like,
but yeah, no, depending on the grow you're in.
So let's get in. That's just, we want, just because that was such a very,
it's a hot topic.
It's a hot topic.
Yeah, and it's a hot topic. And it's important for what a lot of our listeners do.
100%. So we want to chat real quick about that. But really the meat of this episode is this is a questions episode. And I have a feeling this is going to be something that we'll probably do periodically, address, I don't know, 10 to 15 questions or something.
And it's tough for us to get back on the computer sometimes. And not for nothing. So some of the questions we think are quite good and we want everybody to see.
And there's overlap that we see. There's overlap. So let's get right into it. The first one is, and it's a two-part question. This is from the 579 company. Got a question for the pod. I love how you say that. Question for the pod. Okay, so he's a soil reuser. Obviously, he's putting it in totes, letting it all break down, and is wondering if there's any product or method that helps in the breakdown of old roots. So number one, moving things around, getting air in there, keeping healthy bacteria. Any kind of bacteria that you put in there is definitely going to help break down any kind of enzymes that you have. We don't have an enzyme specific product. More so in our line with New Millennium, there's enzymes that are within the line. But even with that, you could throw some ruby fulvic in there, no problem. Even though that's fulvic acids and you don't have a plant for it to be uptaken to, it's definitely going to help with that breakdown. But for sure, any kind of cellulase or pectinase, beta-glucanase, like we talked about, you really want to break it down.
There is a product from one of our competitors that I used to use that's quite good. He's a good friend of the company. I mean,
go for it.
But from the boys at Canna.
Yeah, Cannazyme's great.
The Cannazyme is great. We've discussed it on the podcast in the past. But for cocoa, when a lot of us started using cocoa 10 years ago, they would recommend that you actually did reuse your third and your seventh round. Another thing I would say as well,
which is interesting, they were so specific, third and seventh, and I remember that.
And another thing I would say as well is if you have access to an oven, being able to bake that soil at a plus 130 degrees, depending on how much you have of it. I do bump into places where if you're doing enough of it, it does become an option where you buy a big, there are soil baking ovens, steam distillation as well. Really depends on the size of the project you're working on. But anytime you can bake that soil, get it up to 130 degrees, even if,
most people don't have the ability to do.
Well, I was going to say, so what I used to see with certain people in rooms was if they had HPSs, they would turn the HPSs on, turn off all the ventilation.
You can also tarp, like for outdoor people or for like this, when you have it in totes, you can absolutely in the middle of the summer throw it under a tarp and it's going to get damn hot under there. So that'll break down roots for sure. But I would say in a nutshell, bacteria and enzymes. So and some movement, some turning of that soil, bringing in some fresh air, blending.
Honestly, part of that as well. If you had a big root zone, just physically pulling those roots out of there.
Yeah. And you want to leave a decent amount of them in there, but trust me, there's plenty left in there. I take out the main root ball and the rest of them, it'll all break down. It'll be good. Yep. And obviously the second part of this, the reused soil, as mentioned, is basically now just, pith and perlite. He's re-amending with their own compost, which I would 100% recommend. Also dry amendments, like some down to earth stuff. The all-purpose mix, what's the BioLife, they have so many between the bone meals and everything.
So
I usually like the all-purpose, I like the vegan, and I like the BioLife. Those are all really great products. And then, also having something like an oyster shell in there just to balance out that pH, really keep the buffering capacity of your soil very high. Those are all things that I would consider to amend with. So thank you, 579 Company, for your questions. Hopefully that answered it. Let's move on. Green Ogre Farms, you're on, my friend.
Jug Dealers, help
with an exclamation point. Help.
Can you please look into grease, grow the grease? I've been trying to wrap my brain around science and I need help. Is it a scam, waste of money? Thanks so much for all you do to spread the knowledge. Here's what I'm going to say to this.
Well, first off, you are very welcome. Yeah. Thank you for thanking us, and you're very welcome.
We appreciate you reaching out. Here's what I'm going to say to this one. I briefly went over the website. Anytime I see something that says increases cannabinoids and trade secret in the same sentence, I get skeptical. I definitely just looking, just looking. I'm not gonna go talking shit on these guys. I would say is, I would say it didn't seem that expensive. So run a side by side, would be your best answer. But for me,
here's the thing. I will say that part of that whole, they
spraying anything is
it's 99% iso alcohol. What the hell are you spraying that on your flowers for? So I'll be honest, I've had trouble figuring out the science as well because I don't believe there's any real science behind it.
Yeah,
so
and again, I'm trying to be
nice. Don't waste your money.
I'm trying to be nice.
I know, but I'm also trying to be honest with our look. And here's the thing: some of the claims that have been made about it, seem to be eerily similar to winter frost. Which actually, the next question,
and it's like it's similar to like terpenator and stuff like that.
But we're talking about a completely different mode of action.
Yeah,
done supposedly with cannabinoids from like a hemp crop or something. Look, it's a nice it's a nice rip off of the Mammoth logo. I can tell you that.
I was going to say, I thought it was Mammoth there for a minute.
And guess what? Nobody.
Then I was like, wait, that's a buffalo.
Nobody's there who's going to quickly correct you either. So whatever.
I mean, look,
don't waste your money.
And what we say a lot of times is the best way to increase cannabinoids, terps in your garden is have a healthy garden, and be applying the right things at the right time. You know what I mean? But not these kind of hocus pocus.
Honestly, it's interesting. There's like 5 different colors. I'll be completely honest with you. And I know where it comes from. I know it comes out of. There's some people out there that seem to like it, but there's always going to be somebody that likes some product or wouldn't be on the market at all, right? I find it very confusing about what are all these different colors? What is all this different time for? And then again, I look and anything that makes very interesting claims like that and anything that just then ends with, well, that's how it works.
Well, and again,
then it's that much alcohol. I'm like, I've never sprayed alcohol like that on my plants.
Like I say so many times to people, like there's no industry in the world where there is such a highly uneducated group running the industry, and not for nothing. It's easy to come across and make claims when you're in markets where cannabinoids are so important.
Well, but also
it dictates the price of
all the claims you want. Who's calling you out on it?
And that's just it.
I remember seeing the shittiest fans having the highest CFM, looking in there and going, I know that fan's a better fan, and I can tell you, I can feel that it moves more air. But it's kind of like Tommy Boy said, right? I can take a shit in a box and get a stamp it guaranteed.
Well, and most and again,
who's checking?
And again, most other industries that you would deal with, corn, wheat, soybeans, whatever, they have huge, look at the amount of research that went into that. And then we're talking about, hey, I got this product I tried with 5 people or 10, 20, 30, 40. Who even cares? It's not to the scale of what we've done on other commodities.
All right, so moving on from Tark. Okay, spray neem oil, something like our EcoWorks, as you can see right here on the front of the table, which is a cold pressed virgin neem oil, has all those wonderful micronutrients, has a nice bit of nitrogen there. Well, so it kind of even acts as a fuller feed. I feel like it's almost like a little bit of a cheat because you're hitting a bit of a pesticide with the natural acidurectin in there that's actually in there because it's not chemically extracted. So keep that in mind. If spraying with neem oil in veg, will there be residuals during a wash? No, absolutely not.
And I would say just to keep safe too, the zero tol that we always talk about.
Sure, if you really want to rinse it, absolutely. But the reality is, things like water or rain, if it were outdoors, and light, wind, everything else is going to break down oil. So if you give it long enough, if
you're doing it in veg, you should be
you're fine. Reality is, I'll even spray EcoWorks up through about 2 weeks through flower.
Right till before I see the flower set.
Right before I see flower set, and even at that, there's plenty of time for that oil to break down and move along. But if you're really, really safe, and obviously if you're washing, you want to be incredibly safe, especially with oil-based products, you're good to go in veg. Thank you, Tark, for the question.
Oh, yeah. Lots of people ask the question to us, and I'm going to ask it to you, Jared.
Instead of writing to every single person's name, there is a lot of people that are just wondering, what's in winter frost? How do I use it? And is it real?
What is winter frost? Can it really do what you say? How?
Well, okay. So first off, what is a winter frost? Think of it as a standalone pre-flush. And really what it is, if you were going to put one word on it, you could call it a finisher. You could call it a ripener. The way I like to look at it as a phenotypic expressor, as something that cracks into the genetic potential of the plant. So rather than, forcing a plant into doing something like a Paclo would do, right? So keeping that reduced stretch or some of these 0-50-30 really hardening up, buds or artificially that, I don't tend to like that style. But anyhow, rather than putting it in a headlock, we literally are working with with the plant to just help the plant be everything it can be, right? So that's the whole phenotypic expression, genetic potential aspect of it.
So it triggers senescence.
So it triggers senescence. That's what it's doing. So what it's doing is it's blocking out certain elements, right? It's kind of, and we say that, and this is done, I'm going to say it very simply, done with chelation technology is what I like to say. Now, granted, people go, well, it's a chelate. Doesn't it help with uptake? And yes, it is. And even chelate is from the Latin word claw, right? So even like we were talking about in the last episode, in the micronutrient episode about iron getting bound up in alkaline soils, so using chelated form, you know what I mean? So use chelated form, then the plant can get it. So it's to me, it's similar, you know what I mean? In that way, in that it's just kind of like sitting there and keeping certain things out, kind of like a doorman. And by doing so, it triggers that senescence. What is senescence? And I always loved it. Shout out to Two-Tone Willie, supporter shout out there. Two-Tone, always a fantastic grower, by the way. Excellent selector, longtime DGC guy. Go look him up. Always doing so. He does a bunch of stuff with that destroyer. Really interesting stuff. But anyway, he always loved the senescence word and was like, how do you spell it again? Senescence. Boom, baby. Got it. Okay, what is that? Natural ripening process. Gabe's just laughing. Natural ripening process happens in any annual plant. Mm-hmm. We just get to say when it happens. Mm-hmm. So even with the GMO that I run that to no more than 9 weeks, even though it could go up to 12. And I do that by feeding with whatever you want. Best part is, too, you can put that winter right on top of any other feed schedule. And that's why we call it the Gateway Jug. Obviously, you see the marketing that we've done around that. The whole thought process in that is we're going to give you something that's really easy to put in right at the end of flower. You can stack it on top of any other nutrient program. You're going to get more oil, more color, and more individualization of your strains. That's done, again, by initiating that senescence, that natural ripening process. If there's purple in the plant, you're going to see it. Even if you look at
like I say to people, it ain't going to turn green weed purple.
No.
And that's where people,
it's not God.
Yeah, and that's where people get, I want people to understand, like, it really is getting the plant to express itself.
It has to be in the genetics. And I think a really good...
It reminds me of a good joke my dad used to tell. How does a light bulb, how does a psychologist change a light bulb? Doesn't. The light bulb has to want to change itself.
So
Grandpa's cutting that.
You
didn't tell it 100% right, but
Mr. Comedian over there. Damn it. Now I forgot. I'm just kidding. I'm back. Those dabs between shows. A good example of that is the Gorilla Glue pictures that got posted up on the Jug Dealers IG. And you'll see some of the purple in there. And most people guarantee you haven't seen that unless you've done some hardcore ice and cold water treatments.
Back to phenotypic expression.
But again, it's in there. The point is it's in there. So even with a maple tree, for example, outside, right? It's red in the fall. Where does that red come from? That pigment, those anthocyanins, those pigments are always in there. They're just drowned out by the overprevalence of chlorophyll, all the green. Once the green dies out, which again is this, senescence process. Once the green dies out, that's when the other pigments show through. So that's why you're not going to see a cottonwood be red. It doesn't have that pigment in there.
Yep.
That's why
and basically what we're doing is, like it said, through chelation, we're basically telling the plant, yo, dude,
time to finish.
Time to die.
And
time to die.
Beautiful to use in commercial production as well, because you can take a mixed garden and get it down at relatively the same time.
And look, we got a lot of people out there who use completely different nutrient lines.
Oh, yeah.
And doesn't matter. Front Row, Athena.
All of them. Literally all of them. And I'm talking all the
And they'll hit us up and they'll be like, hey, I used the Ruby in winter to finish.
Fantastic.
And again, for any of the people out there who are questioning, is it like fade? No, they're completely different things. They do different things. They have different modes of action. Any good nutrient company should be cutting back nitrogen at the end of flower. So, I mean, they're completely different things.
They're definitely different products. And again, if you look at ours, it's not even a nutrient. It's a 0.5 EC, 250 ppm.
People are like, what's in it? And you're like, I can't tell you. It's not trade secret. I just can't really tell you.
Well, and that's a good point about the bringing down gardens with different strains, so that could be very important for commercial facilities.
I mean, look,
if you guys run commercial facilities, hit us up, DM us at Jug Dealers or any one of us. We'll make sure.
No problem sending a real sample out to commercial facilities. I'll send you a 5 gallon of it. That's about 2,000 gallons worth at 10 mils a gallon. I'll send it to you. No problem. You got a commercial facility, hit us up. We'll take care of you. No problem.
I used to use it. I used to use it on my Gorilla Glue to get it done at 70 in a commercial facility. And I would actually hit, the nice thing about it is, if you're running something like that, Chem 4. Chem 4 is a notorious non-finisher. You know, that stuff will just go forever. So that's the nice thing about it is you get the plant to the size that you want where you're comfortable and you feel good about everything. And then you just hit it with that winter frost, get her to turn. I'll tell you right now, I mean, if we had Gorilla Glue or if we had GMO in Maryland that tested below 35%, we were disappointed. You know, and that stuff, and that was at 70 days. So, and stuff always stacked up. I think one of the last rooms they harvested of it before I left was like, right after I left was like 103 grams per square foot. So just insane numbers. So we know it works. We as Jug Dealers will show you it works. Just reach out and we'll help you out.
Thanks for lots of people.
So
lots of just
northern light kind, getting more UVB and C in home grows. I mean, this is a tough one. Any of the bars you're going to see when it comes to UV. I mean, look, so a couple things. First off, we don't even have a UV bar. You know, we have the multi-layer fixture that's coming out, the Nova, later this year, which does have UV A and B capabilities. Truth of the matter is, when it comes to UVC and a diode, it's the technology just really is not
in
there.
part because of the makeup of it. It's a light emitting diode. UVC
it's going to break down.
It's going to break down. Think about a red chair that you leave outside in Colorado for the summer. You come in the fall and you go, that's like pink or white now.
Well, and you go to sit on it and it falls apart.
It falls apart, right?
You know, more importantly, it really does break down those things. So, I mean...
in LED technology, you're not really seeing it now. We do have, and actually, why don't you just pick that up for us, Gabe? We do have the UV unit now, not particularly for home grow. This is really more of a commercial unit. It is a commercial top light meant to be coupled with either high bay DE or high bay LED scenarios, because you're using one of these per 4,000 watts.
I got one at home.
No, but you have to be running 4,000 watts. You don't that's the thing. So a tent grow, absolutely not. So this is more of a high bay light.
I mean, you can run at home if you got basement space.
And here's the deal.
If you got a higher ceiling.
Here's what I like to say about that. What you saw in there, you saw that bulb, you saw a little, almost looks like a little mini kind of a CMH bulb almost. It is a double-ended little bulb. But the point I like to make is the reason you can have UVC in there is it's a burning ball of gas. And what is the sun, Gabe?
Burning ball of gas, baby.
Burning ball of gas, baby. Okay, so that's why we can have that.
And remember, UVC, that's the one that fights the pests, the pathogens, the microbial, all that stuff. So it is quite important, not to mention we can get it for you. Expression.
We have it. The technology's there. It's just how big is your home grown and how high is space you have.
Yeah, if you have a 9-foot ceiling in the basement, and realistically, it's not even. More importantly, in a tent, most people are using the multi-layer fixture in which you just can't, you're not putting it above it.
Right.
You can't squeeze this thing in there. That's more the issue is the space constraint, not so much that. And look, again, when we get UVC diode technology figured out, you guys will be the first ones to know. But
maybe it's something where
just not
it'll
there
be,
yet.
Going through a glass diode.
Someone wants to prove me wrong. I'm happy to listen, but I don't know. Anyway.
And can I ask you talked about using it in conjunction? Does it have to be with HPS, or can people use it with LED lighting?
It's supplemental lighting. It's purely supplemental. It's not going to grow plants on its own.
So with LED, it doesn't like it works with HPS.
So think about it like this, Gabe. Or sorry, both of you. All it is just finishing out the spectrum, right?
Yep.
Grambo. So
it's providing a hole. It's fixing a hole in there.
Whether it's the par that's in HPS or it's a par that's in LED, it's filling out the edges of those. So it's UV, A, B, and C all the way over into far red. So
and you're talking,
par spectrum.
You're talking 120 nanometers to like 380 nanometers, in which most spectrometers.
They're not even going to do it. Why? Because par is 400 to 700, and that's what people care about. So anyway, it's outside of that. But again, that's more of the full spectrum. We know that this is what plants use, but there is different triggers that are happening, things like that. I mean, even something like systemic acquired resistance, which is initiated by insect attack. There are other pathways like that are initiated with the right kind of spectrums. Thank you for that question, Northern Light Kind.
Thank you.
Grinch 2024. Hey, was just curious about the winter frost. I have some plants that all have to be chopped at once, but I gave 2 winter frost 7 or 8 days ago, and I grow in straight cocoa. Would that be all right to chop like next dawn and not have negative effects on my finished product? My cure is on point 100%, so it is before the 14-day mark. Cool to harvest. Early thanks to awesome products. Yada, yada, yada. Okay, long story short, yes, you can. The thing is, you're going to get less of that color expression by not giving that extended flush on the back end. So I always like to say,
I mean, look, man, it makes your plants crash. So they really do start consuming all that.
And think about it again. It is part of the flush. So you're not trying to get rid of anything. It's only 0.5 EC. So using it and then cutting down, a week later is going to be fine. I personally, on a 8-ish week schedule, will feed through 6 weeks. Of course, all New Millennium, Green Sensation on top, Slicium as well. But you could do it with whatever. Feed through 6. I use Winter Frost and Ruby Fulvic week 7. Then I flush week 8 into week 9. So I end up with about a 10 to 12 day flush. Oil comes first because the other thing that winter frost does is it makes a plant think that it's going to frost. That's why we call it winter frost. The plant pushes out more oil to protect itself. Think of it as an oil sweater, and never forget, people, we are oil farmers, okay? We're
oil sweater.
Oil sweater. Hashtag oil sweater.
Hey, Eric Paulin's tooth sweater.
That's
awesome.
But again, that's what it's trying to do. So it's trying to protect itself because in general, a trichome, if you look it up in the dictionary, just says a plant hair. Mm-hmm. What the hell does it do? It does a variety of things. Helps keep a plant warm in these type of situations, help retain water to avoid desiccation, helps protect it from the sun. I look at it as like a sunscreen. Yep. So that's why also when you have that UV in there, you see higher trichome production because it's throwing on more sunscreen. So these are reactionary things that we like to put on positive stresses on the plant to get these kind of reactions. So again, feed through 6, winter frost, week 7, flush week 8 to 8.5. If you just went, and used it and chopped down quicker than that, it's going to be fine. You just may not get quite the color that you could have.
Yeah, for sure. Smoked yams. I'm confused.
Smoky yams or smoky yams? I think it's smoky yams.
It could make sense that it was smoky AMs.
Smoking in the morning.
Bake is smoky AMs.
I know what yams are.
Smoky Yams 8636 or Smoky Yams 8636.
Jaron, this is directed at Jaron. We may be able to both explain it, but Jaron, this is directed at you.
Okay.
Could you please explain PK Appetite, when and why it's used in conjunction with my other New Millennium products, Ruby, Green Sensation, PK Appetite, Carbonaria, and Winter Frost? We could both talk about this one because I actually have some cheat codes on it. He didn't mention, and I'm assuming this is a dude, but didn't mention the Decision. The one thing I'll say is if you are using Decision does initiate flower a little bit quicker. It's one of the things that, we talk about stopping the stretch, but the flip side of that is it does initiate flower a little bit faster. With it initiating flower a little bit faster, I've been known to use it day 14. But at 2 mils a gallon. At 2 mils a gallon.
Your name is Gabe, not Jaron.
Yeah.
Second off, I agree with you, but what the hell is it? You're talking about using it. Let's talk about more what it is, because really that's the root of the question. And what it is PK Appetite. If we actually look at it, even the fact that it says APATITE, that's a soft rock mineral that's a natural P and K chelate. So what this is doing, even the fact that it's 0.6.9, so it doesn't have really any charge to it. This is not a bloom booster, which is why you use it in conjunction with Green Sensation. So soft rock mineral maximizes P and K uptake. So if you're running it in conjunction with the bloom booster, or even it's going into like autumn or whatever base you have, base bloom program that you have, and pulling up that P and K more efficiently. There is obviously some P and K, bunch of other biostimulants and bacteria in there as well. You pop the cap on there and it almost smells like essential oily.
But good. But like I said, you definitely are using it earlier than you would use your PK booster.
Yeah.
Even on the saucer base cake.
We start bringing that up because it's going to start bringing in that, not with the Green Sensation yet, but it's going to start pulling it up from the autumn in our case, right?
Yeah, or even from your pH down.
Or from your pH down, wherever it's finding phosphorus. And again, the appetite's kind of a two-part meaning, right? So it's making us think that the plant is more hungry for P and K, and it's alluding to that soft rock mineral appetite. Gabe and I actually went and found a number of pretty cool, we should throw that up maybe, but we found some pretty cool rock examples at the, what was that? What museum was that?
It was the Field Museum.
Field Museum, Chicago.
And when I do get, again, that's more of a pro tip that I give people. And it is the type of thing though, where I've given it to people and like, they're sitting here at day 17, 18 and they call me back and they're like, hey dude, these things look like it's like day 21. And I'm like, yeah, that's because it's really a company. It's
really grabbing that up. And you make a wonderful point. When you get that flower initiation faster, you can start using P and K products.
And that's one of the biggest things, I mean, look, I tell people pretty openly, I used a different nutrient line before I ever started using New Millennium. It was Phil Haig who kind of forced me to use this stuff. But the things like Decision, the things like PK Appetite, the things like Winter Frost, these are really the cheat codes that there's a reason you don't see other companies make this stuff. They either can't figure it out or it's too expensive, one or the other. But it is one of those things where, like, it's very unique to what we provide, in which, that's something that sets us apart from everybody else.
It is. So great question. I'm actually really glad you asked that. Smoky yams, whatever it is. I think it's a great question because it's often asked. The other thing, I think of it as a companion product. That's the one thing, that's kind of the buzzword I like to use about it. The only other thing I can compare it to in the market, and only because of the way that it falls in the schedule, would be Bud XL from House and Garden, which it's coupled with either the Top Shooter or Top Shooter or Top Max. One of they flip flop. They've got two different bloom boosters, and it's used in accompaniment. Other than that, incredibly unique product. Thank you, Smoky Yams 8636 for the wonderful PK app.
Love the name. Flowers for Dad. I know this is going to make way. Do we go to the next one?
No.
I have to go now. My planet needs me.
We got cut short a little bit. So we did have one more question that we did want to address. This is from the homie, the Press Club. Yo, brother, hope the year has been a blessing so far. Excited to watch the last episode. I'm curious to understand more of the relationship between flushing cocoa, specifically your harvest, and peak terp levels. At some point, your plant won't have the nutrient it needs to continue with proper metabolic functions, potentially yielding to subpar product. At what point is the harvest past optimum harvest time? And how is this affected by environmental, heat, humidity, light exposure, strength, time? Press Club, this is a great question. It's definitely important for anybody out there who really wants to make sure that they are harvesting their cannabis at the most optimum time. There's a couple different things you can do in this instance. First of all, I'm going to take the second part of the question first. How is it affected by environment, heat, humidity, light exposure, strength, time? You're definitely going to want to be lowering those temperatures at the end of your harvest. Now, that being said, I try to keep my temperatures day and night within a 4-degree temperature variance. That way it kind of avoids, you have less problems with powdery mildew. The other thing you're going to want to focus on is making sure you don't have those humidity spikes in the middle of the night. So we're doing our best to control the environment in that respect. And yes, lowering the temperatures is going to help with some of those more volatile terps. Now, that being said, those volatile terps those hyper volatile terps, we'll say, will evaporate generally when you're harvesting in higher temperatures anyway. The ones we're worried about really are good from like 160 on. So we're not worried about that too much. The other thing as well is going back to, passing the optimum harvest time. So a couple things we're going to want to observe is definitely trichome, not only production, but we're going to want to observe the actual trike heads as far as color, whether they're amber, whether they've gone to milky as well. And then, a lot of times, hopefully this is a genetic that you've had some time with. It can definitely be difficult when it's the first time, in which I will say I'm using a scope quite often throughout the entire process. When I've had the luxury of being able to work in commercial gardens, we actually do use the lab that we have in there, in which we have an HPLC, we have an HPGC, in which we can definitely kind of monitor. I've noticed that there's a bit of a curve, usually, your CBG converts to THC. Now that's not a steadfast all the time thing. There's definitely portions in certain cultivar that do have high levels of CBG, but in general, it is converting over to THC, which then quickly converts to CBN. So if you have the luxury of having some of this equipment, it definitely helps in that respect. And the one thing I would say as well is, as far as crashing those nutrients, we're definitely thinking about the overall structure of the plant or the overall quality of the plant, but understand the fact that as you get towards the end of the plant's life, it's not needing as much. If you'll notice as you get towards, let's say, the last week or so of a plant's life, a lot of times they stop drinking as much. So they know another way to really kind of pinpoint where you're at as far as your ECs is to actually test not only your runoff, but like I've said in the past, do an NC State pour through media extracted test. You can look that up online. But that's going to help you determine what your EC in the plant is, in which I would say, in answer to this question, the window can be very small, and you definitely want to kind of pinpoint things, but you can also drive that window yourself by knowing your cultivar, potentially, take good notes, say to yourself, hey, we took this at 65 days last time, and I noticed that there was more milky amber than I wanted. Let's try 63 and, maybe we'll start our flush a day earlier. So I think a lot of it is taking good notes. People need to understand we're running lots of different things at the same time. So potentially you're going to have a lot of cultivar that don't want to finish at the same time. Again, another reason it's kind of cool to use winter frost because it does push things. When I used it with GMO, I would get to the point where the plant was pretty much where I was happy with the development, and then I would use winter frost to help it finish up. So I hope that answers your question and what you were kind of looking for. Again, it's definitely a little bit difficult because you want to be knowing the cultivar. Now, that being said, I do know you personally, and I do know the heat that you grow, and I do know the fire hash that you put out. So I don't know that you have too much difficulty with figuring out the most optimum time to take these genetics. So we wanted to address that question because I know you had reached out. We're going to do another one of these episodes where we answer more viewer/listener questions. So by all means, keep them coming. We try to keep them to the point where everybody's getting something out of it, but we appreciate you guys. We appreciate your questions. We appreciate everything you do for us. So from the Jug Den and this episode of the Jug Dealers, peace.